Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tour de Cons, your podcast all about conventions and the fun we have at them. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, and we are continuing our series of going in the dark side. That's right, in the horror genre. Texas Frightmare Weekend is coming up the first weekend of May, and I've been lucky enough to have some fans of the convention and of the genre join me. And tonight is no exception. Tonight I have Todd joining me. Welcome, Todd.
Hey, thank you very much. Pleasure to be on, Jesse.
Well, I appreciate that. So tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I am the classic horror kid from the 80s, I suppose. I was born in 70, and so right about the time I was hitting the golden age of video, was hitting its stride, is when I was hitting my stride as a burgeoning horror fan, I guess you'd say. So that golden era of the classic stuff that came out in the 80s was really my forte. But throughout the 70s, I was the kid in class who, when the Scholastic book form came around, I was ordering books about vampires. I was ordering the books about the Bermuda Triangle and mysteries and monsters and untold secrets and things like that. So that was kind of my introduction. I had a King Kong bank in my bedroom, and I would watch the Godzilla and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein kind of movies on TV growing up. And then my dad had a bunch of movie books, that crime films, westerns, sci-fi, and he had horror books, which was what I kind of gravitated towards. And I used to love perusing those and looking at the pictures of the old Hammer and Amicus films that I wouldn't see for a number of years later. But that stuff always fascinated me. So, and then about the time I reached age 13 was when I reached my first Fangoria magazine off the shelf at the store, and that pretty much set in stone anything from that point on. So
there were a lot of us, the Fangora, that gave us a perfect, I remember Starlog, right? And other, I'm a little bit older than you, but I remember that we didn't have the internet. And I don't want to sound into this as a good old days or old man podcast, but, that magazine you got once a month was sometimes the only news you got about new movies or movies that are out. So, now then it's so easy just to pop up your browser and go, oh, I wonder when the second part of It's coming out, and, just hit enter.
right.
But back then, that's all we had.
Yeah, there was no links to click on. There was nobody sending you anything telling you, hey, heads up, here's what's coming out or what's coming down the pike. It was all about picking up that magazine and then looking at what the next issue was going to be covering. That was as far into the future as you could really get. I was reading the editorial at the very beginning of the magazine, enjoying what they had in the new issue, but then seeing what may be coming in the in the following issue.
And the other thing, it is, now then it's pretty easy to find, first off, on demand, or if you own the DVDs, or just online. I want to watch this, Dawn of the Dead or something. I just do, but back then, right, you had to, TV Guide or the newspaper TV section, just going through, just looking at late nights or on the weekends to say, okay, where can I find, where can I find to have just a little bit of this?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And USA Network on cable was a great outlet for that kind of stuff. We had a night flight program where they would show not only clips from movies, or they would have highlights of films that were coming out or had come out in the recent past, but you'd be able to watch some of those. I forget the name of the captain on there. He wore a mask and cape, but he was one of the hosts. It was on the USA Network, and he was a lot of fun, and they kind of gave you that insight. It seemed to be speaking to me. He was, it was my special thing. It wasn't anything my folks would be into. Oftentimes it wasn't anything that my friends were into in some cases, but it seemed to speak directly to me.
Yeah, I get that. I understand that totally. What do you have a favorite? Now, you've mentioned you're a child of the 80s, but do you have a favorite genre, or was there a um, gateway film that kind of got you hooked besides the magazine?
Well, the more tame stuff that you could see on TV, as far as the Godzillas and Abbott and Costello initially, but the stuff that the 80s came to be known for, probably Alien and especially Friday the 13th Part 3. That was one where, I was staying at my grandmother's house, and late at night on cable on HBO, that movie was playing. So after everybody went to bed, I stayed up and watched Friday the 13th Part 3, which felt dangerous and forbidden because it wasn't something that my mom would want me to watch for sure. But that was such an eye-opener, and it's something that remains a favorite to this day. I don't care how hokey it seems. I don't care how canned the scares may seem in relation to what's come since. It was really something that I embraced wholeheartedly. And, a couple of the other ones that I saw around that time were The Thing and American Werewolf in London. And so I saw those are the crown jewels, in many respects, as far as the 80s go. So,
I remember, American Werewolf in London, hey, it was the Dr. Pepper guy. This is going to be a nice, easy romp. And it was, there certainly was a little bit of humor in there, but, there was a wonderful streak of tension. And one of my great things, I'm a big comic book fan, and when Christopher Reeve's first Superman movie came out, we remember going to the theater, and and the advertisement was, "You'll believe a man could fly." And when we went, it was just groundbreaking, the idea of watching Christopher Reeves, fly. It didn't look hokey. It didn't look like wires. It truly looked like he could fly. And I remember watching American Werewolf in London by the great John Landis, and watching that special effects and him grow, not nothing against Michael Landon. I Was a Teenage Werewolf, where, stop motion becoming a werewolf. I mean, it looked like it was happening.
Right. Well, and that's how Rick Baker, that's what he wanted you to believe. He wanted you to say, "Oh my God, I just saw a guy change into a werewolf right before my eyes," and you really did.
Yeah, it was just amazing. And the beautiful thing about, as we're recording this, Roger Bannister just died, the first guy who broke the 4-minute mile. And it's a prime example of, once something is done, you prove that it's possible, then it becomes, if not easy, easier. And I think that American Werewolf set the idea of, we could be serious. We could be, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm a big Abbott and Costello fan. I love, Who's on First, and I love all their horror movies, and that Universal Monsters and the fun. But the idea of, we can have this humor, we can have these great special effects, we can do a serious movie that has the horror elements and such. So, yeah, you're right. That is something. That's a great movie to talk about. That it, kind of convinced you and talked to you.
Well, and it's interesting when Star Wars. I don't know what kid wasn't a huge fan of Star Wars in the 70s, especially if you were a young boy like I was.
Yeah.
And Rick, knowing that Rick Baker did some of those creature effects for the cantina scene in Star Wars, it becomes interesting that, I would have look back and said, "Oh my gosh, I was a fan of Rick Baker's work when I was 6 years old."
Yeah.
He still had an impact in some way on me even at that point.
And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the Texas Frightmare weekend is they bring in behind the scenes people, not just quote unquote the movie stars.
Right.
They embrace the whole genre of special effects, writers, filmmakers, and that's just really cool that you can have the chance to talk to people that are behind the scenes and kind of learn from them, enjoy them, and share your appreciation. So very cool.
Sure.
Now,
Sure.
yeah. Um, so Todd, you talked about buying the vampire books and the Lost, the Bermuda Triangle. Is there a specific, like, is it zombies? Is it vampires? Or is there not a specific genre that you seem to, you know, move to mostly?
Well, I don't know that it's a particular genre. I love zombies. I love zombie films. I love the work of George Romero. And I started off strong as far as the Walking Dead series went, but I only followed it up until about season 4, and then I turned my interest elsewhere. I love zombies and zombie films. I love a little bit of everything, really. George Romero, that's what I like about his work, and especially Carpenter. They didn't just stick with one thing. I know everybody pegs George Romero as the godfather of the zombies, and a lot of people ride him, for sticking so closely to that genre, and some would say beating a dead horse. But if that's not your thing, I guess you can turn your attention elsewhere. But I like that he kind of mined that story and took it places that you didn't really foresee it going. And I also like the fact that he has movies in his canon like Martin, which is an all-time favorite with John Amplis. And John Carpenter, same thing. He's either doing something you can't quite peg as science fiction or horror or action. It's a little bit of everything with Escape from New York. Or you have all-out horror of the thing. And I love that those directors have even though they're kind of under the umbrella of horror and are pretty much pigeonholed by that, they seem to have a whole broad array of things under that umbrella that they've done. So I take it all in. And, I don't know about you, but I can appreciate, and maybe it's the older I got, the further back I was able to look with a level of appreciation for not only the Universal movies that came before everything, but the atomic age stuff of the 40s and 50s, the Hammer stuff, some of the Frank Henenlotter gritty New York vibe of the basket case kind of things that came out, and even stuff like Ed Wood, which some of Ed Wood stuff, just falls under cult films, not necessarily horror or sci-fi, or sometimes you can't even peg what exactly it is. But, all that is appealing to me. So whether it's independent or the latest blockbuster, like it became, I like taking it all in and digesting it all, and because it's all part of what I love.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you? My friend Ken was on the podcast a couple episodes ago, and he has a special place in his heart for, B movies. The gorier, the cheaper looking. He just has a sentimental attachment to them. How about you? Do you like the big blockbusters that you can tell that they've really put a lot of money on the screen? Or do you have a softness in your heart for maybe something that this independent filmmaker is doing and trying to do something a little different?
A little both, because
Yeah.
when it came out, for example, everybody was raving about it, and I was watching it break all these box office records, and I don't know why, but I have this: the more people rave about something, the less inclined I am to want to see it, because I feel like now they're really building it up, and it's going to, pop that balloon for me when I go see it. I'm going to be thinking, oh, I bought into the hype. Now look, I'm stuck watching this. And that actually wasn't the case. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. But, again, I'm all for those kind of movies that Ken was talking about too. I love the kind of movies that someone like Frank Henenlotter puts out, which are completely, you really have to, it's kind of a very definite market that, his films will appeal to. I'll give anything a chance, even a Serbian film, which everybody found so controversial a couple of years ago, something like that. Or last year at TFW, I stopped by the Wild Eye Releasing Table, which is an independent, very independent film company, and they were offering, just practically giving product away. I mean, I think their deal was like five DVDs for $20 or something. And they have movies that feature actors like Doug Bradley in some cases. In the case of a movie they did called Scream Park. Or there's movies like Grime Wave. There's even one that had a ridiculous title that I bought simply for the outrageousness of it alone. It was called Stabbed in the Face, which is pretty much what the title would indicate. And, there's some greater levels of art in some movies than others, but I'll take it all in. I don't shy away from watching something. It kind of the horror palette, has all that stuff available to me, and I feel like I should at least sample everything on there so I know if I like it or not.
Yeah, I think that's a very good, kind of wide open, because you never know when you're going to be pleasantly surprised.
Exactly.
Ken and I meet once a week. We worked together for years, and now then we don't work for the same company. So we meet once a week, and, we end up talking about podcasts or movies he's watched or things we've done, and we share this. And, and he has a similar thing to you. Just because it's a blockbuster doesn't mean he isn't going to give it a chance. The whole idea, well, if it's commercial, it must be, junk, right? Like if the masses would like it, it can't be any good.
Right. They're figuring it was probably filtered through committee after committee until it was so watered down and far removed from the source material.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you mentioned TFW. So talk to me a little about that. Give me, how many times have you gone, and what was your first show?
Well, this coming up in May, this will be my 5th time attending TFW.
Okay.
It wasn't on my radar until I went to a different convention in 2009. I went to something that was sponsored by Fangoria called Trinity of Terror in Las Vegas. It was actually held over Halloween. It was the most ill-attended convention I've been to out of anything so far. Just to give you an example, George Romero, Tom Savini, David Naughton, Dee Wallace, John Kassir, the Crypt Keeper from Tales from the Crypt, all those folks were there. Nobody had a line whatsoever. Roger Corman was in attendance and had no line. Bruce Campbell had no line, which it was surreal.
I have another friend, Tom Zoller, who is a comic book artist and writer, and he's had a little bit of success. And IDW just put out his Time in Vine, which is a time travel story set in a vineyard. He said, what's better? I could drink wine and do it as research. He went to a Vegas convention, and he said it just was horrible. It was more of a comic book sci-fi one. And it's just, I think, conventions go to Las Vegas a lot, but it tends to not be the kind of, you're going there to do some of the activities, to go to the shows, to do gambling, and it's not really an audience that's there to meet people. Similar to, there was a convention in New Orleans a couple of years, and you know, um, the comic book convention did okay, but not great because people would rather spend their time out in New Orleans, eating great food or drinking. So,
Right, collecting
yeah,
beads and looking at cemeteries and
yeah,
whatever.
exactly, yeah. That's kind of that was great for those who attended, though, that you're able to spend some time with people.
Yeah, that aspect of it was great, but I felt self-conscious, walking around because I was like, oh my gosh, these people should be surrounded by hordes of adoring fans like myself.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was, shooting fish in a barrel, basically. I mean, I was able to walk around and basically walk up to anyone and everyone I wanted to and talk to them. And it was great, but it was kind of sad at the same time. And I think that was the last time Fangoria did a convention. I could be wrong if there was something they held elsewhere, but that was right before all their kind of woes started escalating, in the Fangoria world. But in any case, to go back to your question, I had gone up to the lobby from the convention to go get something, and I was in the elevator, and I commented on a fellow fan's Creepshow T-shirt. And so I got to talking to him on the ride back down on the elevator, and we were talking about the convention, and he asked if I'd ever been to Texas Frightmare weekend. And I said, no, I hadn't. And he said, and this is in 2009, so I mean, the convention had only been around for a few years, but he said that TFW was by far the best convention he had ever been to, and he recommended wholeheartedly that I waste no time whatsoever in getting my butt down to the next one. And that happened to be the following May when they announced that John Carpenter would be there with the Christine reunion.
Wow. And so now, where is home for you, Todd?
Hello?
Uh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Todd.
No worries.
Where is home?
I'm in Boise, Idaho.
Okay. Yeah. So you're like, okay, I've got to go to this thing. What were your first thoughts when you went to your first one?
The first TFW?
Yes.
I was floored because that was the year that John Carpenter and George Romero were both there. So to have John Carpenter and George Romero in the same building kind of blew my mind. To see the cast of Christine there, to see the car, that was amazing. I loved meeting those folks. And in the case of people like Keith Gordon, who played Arnie in the movie, that was his first convention. He hadn't been to anything of the kind, and so he was eating it up. And the whole cast was just very welcoming. Everybody loved to see them and have the opportunity to get things signed and shake a hand and get a photo and everything. But they were having as good a time as everyone else was, which was fun to see. I got to meet John Amplis that weekend as well.
Yeah. Do you find that is a common theme for TFW, that it just feels a little different than other conventions you attend?
I think so. I think out of any of the conventions I've gone to, it's been easiest to talk to people in line. It's been easiest to just, whether it's the volunteers that are directing you where you need to go and they recognize you from having given you directions earlier in the day, and they just ask how you're doing and who you've been able to see. And just everybody, it seems like a community. Even though it's a community of strangers, you don't leave thinking that, you leave feeling like you've made friends all weekend.
So I go to a fair amount of conventions. I live here in Dallas. Fan Fest happens. I made several comic paloozas down in Houston. I was lucky enough to be involved with Comic Palooza, their Doctor Who kind of segment. I go to Dragon Con most years in Atlanta, Georgia, which is a massive convention. And it has the similar feel, even though there's 40,000 fans over 5 hotels, everyone is so friendly and everyone is happy they're there. The guests mingle among everyone, and they are quick to um, spend time talking to fans. I've gone to conventions where, um, what do you want to buy? Well, I really just want to say hi to this, actor. No,
Right.
if you're going to buy something, if not, get out of line. And, at Dragon Con, they go, yeah, just keep it short because, we have a long line. And that's what I love about the camaraderie we have of loving these movies, loving this genre, and getting time to spend with people. You can have almost as much fun talking to a guy or gal next to you in line as you do actually talking to the celebrity.
Sure. And now you've gone to Comic Cons before. Has that been the same experience with those as opposed to the horror conventions?
So um, I've never made um, San Diego. Um, my friend Tom, again, once I talked about, does tons of, and he said the difference between Dragon Con and Comic Con is Comic Con people are drinking to dull the pain, and at Dragon Con they're drinking because they're having fun. Um, this is not a plug for Dragon Con, but if you have ever thought about going, it is a little bit Mardi Gras, a little bit Halloween, and a little bit comic convention.
Oh, fun.
There is just tons of people dress up, the most obscure um, characters you can imagine they would dress like. And then I went a couple years ago and they had an Archer cosplay contest that enough people had dressed up like um, the animated action, spy, spoof,
Right, right.
that they actually had enough that they could compete for, who would be the best Pam, who would be the best Archer. Um,
Oh my God.
yeah, and so, and I get that same feeling for um, when I've gone to TFW and the people I've talked to, that it is, we're just here to have fun. We certainly, the people working the booths want to sell their merchandise because they've got to pay for the booth, but they're just as happy for you to come by and say, I really like this film, or, oh, what a great collection, and to talk people. It is not about the dollar. It is truly about let's everyone have a good time. So,
Well, and oftentimes, a lot of those vendors, if you're buying something and they know what your interests are, they'll start talking to you about something else you might be interested in too that maybe you're not aware of. And
yeah,
and that's always fun to talk with them on a fan level and not just I'm here to sell you something level.
yeah, and there's so many good stories you can get and share. Uh, and one of the now I'm going to break this rule for Catherine Hicks. I want to talk about Star Trek 4. Uh, and but the rule is supposedly you should find something like Ethan Adams, I want to talk about the thing you do. Uh, you know, he's done a lot of other stuff. You know, I Steven Weber, I want to talk about Studio 60. How was it working
Right.
for, Aaron Sorkin and doing that kind of the villain, but ended up being this great guy. Um, so my first piece of advice for you, if you've not gone to conventions or if you're not, um, it is it's okay to bring up some of the more obscure stuff that someone has done, especially if it means something to you, because they will appreciate hearing that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And I heard you and Ken talking about that on the podcast that I was
Oh,
listening
thank you.
to that you guys did.
Yeah.
And he was kind of saying the same thing. And I'm sure that they do appreciate hearing, for the millionth time that you love them in, this project or that, which is what seems to be the focus of, most of the people in line. But if you're the one that brings up something unusual, it kind of raises an eyebrow and piques their interest, and it's kind of like a breath of fresh air to be able to talk about something that they didn't expect anybody to bring up. Like in the case of Michael Pare, who was at TFW, he was from Eddie and the Cruisers. He was Eddie. I had him sign an Eddie and the Cruisers poster, but I spent probably 10 minutes talking to the guy about Bad Moon, his
nice.
werewolf movie that he'd done, and he was really enthusiastic about that. He loved talking about it. And, of course, that was more horror, but I don't think it's really what everybody knows him for. They all know him as Eddie and the Cruisers. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Just to bring up an example. And I know that people love that. I know that people they love knowing that you don't just know the greatest hits. You kind of go into the deep album cuts of their career and bring up the things that are out of the spotlight a bit.
Yeah. Nana Visitor, who played in Deep Space Nine, she played, Kara. And
Right.
she was at Dragon Con many years ago. And there was no one in line, so I went up to her and I said, Nana, I just wanted to say that in 2001, my wife and I went to New York for the first time when you were in Chicago. She goes, oh, yeah. I said, and so you'll always be my Roxy. When I think of Roxy in Chicago, I'm going to think of you. And she said, thank you. That has made my weekend. I just appreciate that so much. Another example of that's very close to what you're discussing is I was at a convention and Nastasha Henstridge, I guess is how you say her last name, Henstridge.
From Species, Natasha
Yes,
Henstridge.
right. So there's Species and there's people signing, and I said, hey, I just loved you and Eli Stone. And her face lit up, and if they had not made me move away, we would have talked all day. She talked about how much she loved the series, how much she enjoyed it. It was just one of the funnest things she's ever done. And she lit up. And what was nice is I just wasn't looking for, it truly was, I love that series. So that's kind of neat. And I think that's one of the fun things. Jack Dylan Grazer is going to be there, and he is scheduled to play Captain Marvel Jr. in the upcoming Shazam movie. And so while everyone else is going to be talking about it, or Me, Myself, and I'm going to be like, so, what can you tell me about Shazam?
Right.
Yeah.
And he'll probably be like, oh, wow, okay, great. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some other moments, favorite memories of the show that you might want to share, Todd?
Well, the one of the years that, actually, I think it was 2010, the year I met John Amplis from Martin, who's actually in Creepshow and Dawn of the Dead and a number of Romero films. I was really enthusiastic about meeting him, and he was great. We got to stop and talk with him at length. But after the convention, my buddy and I were sitting out in the hotel lobby bar, and he saw us up there, and he came over and sat down and started talking with us. He bought us some drinks and just sat there and picked our brains and talked with us like we'd been old friends for years, and sat there probably about an hour or so. And he gets up and leaves to go retire to his hotel room and freshen up and just kind of chillax. And I think 5-10 minutes had gone by after he left when all of a sudden Kane Hodder walks up and asks if my buddy Matt and I would be willing to move from the seats that we were at to the 2 seats over to our right, because we were sitting at the very end of the bar. And we said, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. We'll let you have your privacy and blah, blah. And he says, oh, no, don't go anywhere. He says, I just kind of, if we could have the end seats here, so we're just kind of out of view, and just kind of, not the focus of attention. We'd just like to sit here and just talk with you guys if you want, just hang with us. Okay.
Yeah, wow,
So
that's
we
cool.
moved over, and yeah, Kane Hodder and his date sat down next to us, and we spent another hour just yakking with Kane Hodder and his date, and just having a great time. And he just wanted to be a normal person and just sit and hang out at the bar and talk with whoever. He just didn't want to be inundated by, oh, look, it's Kane Hodder and a bunch of photos and all that. So he just real low key just wanted to switch seats with us. So he had the end seats closest to the wall, and then me and my buddy were kind of running interference and affording him that privacy. So that was kind of fun. And that
Yeah,
opportunity certainly doesn't present itself often.
yeah, and that would be another piece of advice I would give to people going. If you do spot a someone in the wild, you know, go up and talk to them and wait for them to say, "Oh, would you want a photo?" Just because the memory of you getting to talk to them, even if you don't get a photo, will be something you'll appreciate and enjoy.
Right. Well, it's a
Yeah,
private moment between you and them that otherwise
yeah,
would not have happened.
absolutely. So awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Other things you can remember, Mike?
Oh, gosh. Well, talking to Carolyn Monroe was the last minute. I forget who had to cancel, but they added Carolyn Monroe from the Hammer film Dracula AD 1972. She was a Bond girl. They added her as a late addition a couple years back, and I was thrilled that they did. And I went and talked to her, and of course, she was in the movie Maniac with Joe Spinell. Um, so that was fun being able to talk to her because a Hammer actress is not someone that you see very often, or at least I haven't any of the conventions that I've been to. George the Animal Steel. I grew up watching wrestling in the 80s, and to see him and get him to sign something from Tim Burton's Ed Wood was fun. And of course, he was taking photos, wrapping his arms around like he's got you in a chokehold, and so that was special. And of course, he's, people like that. George the Animal Steel, for example, he's no longer with us. He passed away a couple years ago. And I found that to be the case with a number of people that I've been fortunate enough to meet at different conventions. So, to be able to go back and spend a few minutes talking with some of my heroes, I feel like I kind of need to because, nobody's getting any younger. I'm certainly not.
Yeah,
And
I a couple years ago at Dragon Con, Ron Glass was there, um, from Barney Miller and from Firefly, and he was just lovely. We talked for a few minutes. Obviously shared about how much I love Firefly and back in the day at Barney Miller, and he. One of the things I think is very cool with, um, and I certainly think it's great if you want to get a professional photo of where you pay your money and it's a professional photographer, but in a lot of ways it's just really cool to get a selfie at the table.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's a little less money, it's a little more personal, and so he'd had one, and then we've lost him. And Richard Hatch was at a very small show here in Dallas, the original,
Apollo.
Apollo, and I got to talk to him, and I was telling him how much I loved him in the new BSG, and he was glad to share about how much he enjoyed and how much he appreciated Ron Moore inviting him in, and how that character had a good arc, and how he was, as sad as he was that he ended up dying, spoilers, but he enjoyed that arc, and as an actor, he really, that was something special for him. So, and now then he's gone. So I think that's a really wonderful point to put out, Todd, not to be morbid, but when you have a chance to talk to someone who's someone you admire, a cinema hero, or it's good to take that chance and to
Sure.
take that
Well,
opportunity.
in 2012 alone, three of the guests are gone. Roddy Piper, Ernest Borgnine, and Gunnar Hansen
Yeah,
were all guests in 2012. They're all gone.
yeah,
And, we've lost George Romero. We've lost Toby Hooper. We've lost Wes Craven here in the last couple of years. And so, man, these opportunities to get a photograph or to just express your appreciation to some of these folks, I take it every opportunity I can. And
yeah.
I relish that.
Um, so, in addition to doing podcasts, I listen to a lot of podcasts. And when George Romero died, Penn Jillette from Penn and Teller told a pretty funny story. He said that Romero's um, zombie films are, he thinks, just some of the greatest films ever. He thinks they're what they're trying to say about society and and about human touch and everything. He got very emotional about it, and he said a few years ago they were going to premiere his latest film, and it was going to be in Vegas. And Penn, he says, is not. He says, I'm certainly not a close friend with him, but we at least knew each other. And so he sent him an email, Penn Jillette did, saying, George, I just want to let you know that I hate you. You are one of my favorite filmmakers, and the Night series is one of my favorite series, and you are coming to my town to premiere your latest film, and it is happening when I am working. I resent you. I'm just, I hope you have great success, but know that you've made an enemy, you know, kind of half joking, right?
Right.
So Romero sent back and said, I'm now in an awkward position because, we were friends and I was going to ask a favor, but now that you're mad at me, I don't know. He said, but if you can put across your anger, I need to do a test run in the theater. I need to see if the sound and the film works well. So if you would do me the favor of coming in the afternoon of the premiere, and I don't care if you bring some friends or not, but if you guys could just watch the movie and then to help me make sure that the sound and film is okay, you would be doing me a big favor. But I know you're mad at me, so you probably don't want to do the favor. And
Oh, no.
uh, and so Penn that told that story after he had passed, saying that it was just the sweetest way of I want you to be able to see my film, on that day. So, um, and I guess everyone who's ever met with him or talked to him said he truly was one of the sweetest men in person.
He was. He was very sweet, kind. He was very accommodating.
Yeah,
And for him to do the convention appearances that he would, and the kind of hours that he would log, just with his endless line, and
yeah.
he has so much great stuff that people wanted to get signed. So a lot of people were leaving with stacks of things that they had him sign. Boy, what a trooper!
Yeah, and the reality is, I believe, and I am at heart someone who's very optimistic and not very cynical. Um, he didn't need the money. This was
No,
purely just giving back to his fans and enjoying meeting them and sharing with them. So, well done. All right,
yeah, and
go ahead.
well, I was just going to point out that one of the major sponsors of TFW, Arrow Video, they just put out um, several of George's movies in full bells and whistles editions that are well worth picking up. And the one that I watched yesterday, the Season of the Witch Blu-ray, has a conversation between Guillermo del Toro and George Romero that lasts an hour or so.
Wow.
It brought me to tears a couple times because the insight that Guillermo del Toro has and the love for George's movies was just incredible to watch, and to see George's reaction to some of the insights that Guillermo shared with him. Really something to see. And so, Arrow being at TFW again this May, that's something people are definitely going to want to try and keep an eye out for, is those Romero reissues, because they're wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess this is a good time to remind everyone it's May 4th, 5th, and 6th at the Hyatt Regency DFW Airport. So that's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's Friday night. Then Saturday will start at 11 a.m., go to 7 p.m., and then 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Sunday. TexasFrightmareWeekend.com to get tickets. We're hoping to see you there. So, Todd, who are you excited about seeing this year?
I am excited to meet Charles Band. I missed him last year. I think the only time I saw him, I saw the back of his head as he was walking out the men's room door, and I never got a chance to see him at his actual booth. So for sure, I want to see him. I'm a slasher fan, so meeting Steve Dash from Friday the 13th Part 2, meeting Peter Cowper, who was the minor Harry Warden in My Bloody Valentine. Ron Perlman, I'm thinking about having him sign Quest for Fire.
That's
and of course,
nice.
Brad Dourif. Yeah, Brad Dourif, and I think it'll be a treat to see the 4 Cenobites. I've seen Doug Bradley before, but to see the other 3 will be nice.
Yeah, I think so. Brad Dourif had a very memorable role on a Babylon 5 episode, and I'm hoping if I get a chance to talk to him to see if he'll remember anything of that. Babylon 5 is one of my favorite series. I am just always impressed at the diversity of guests they get. And this year is a celebration of Chucky, so they have a lot of people there. Brad Dourif, Fiona Dourif, Christine Elise, who I will always think of as Emily Valentine from 90210. Yeah. So a lot of great people. Sean Hassedy I really liked him in Southland and Fear the Walking Dead. So there's just going to be a lot of great people to meet and talk to. Katie Featherstone, this is her first convention. And so I think that's going to be kind of fun to see her, enjoying that energy. I think this is going to be great. Anyone else that you're thinking about that you may want to give a shout out that you're looking forward to seeing?
Well, when we're talking about independence, because there's going to be a lot of independence there, Parrish Randall is seemingly, to me, the face of Texas independent horror cinema. He is always a gas to talk to, so I'm looking forward to trying to catch up with Parrish Randall. And, again, some of those, like the folks from Wild Eye Releasing, I'm going to stop by their table and see what they have on offer. And see some more of these independent movies that are not going to be found at my local Best Buy, that I'm not necessarily going to see pop up in my shopping suggestions on Amazon, that I'm only going to find at a place like TFW.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. So I've done this. You're my third guest I've had to talk about, but I always like to go, do you have any suggestions? Every once in a while we get listeners who have never gone to a major convention or have never even gone to a convention at all. So, Todd, advice you want to give to newbies?
Well, whatever money you think you want to spend, make sure you have more than that money, because I guarantee your priorities will shift as soon as you get there and you lay eyes on what is on offer.
Yes.
As always is the case with me, my initial target list for guests I want to meet and things I want to buy. Some people get crossed off my list entirely. Some people get added to my list that I didn't anticipate. I end up buying a lot more than I should. because it's just an opportunity that only comes along once a year. If this is your big blowout, that you get to take your vacation and go off and fly your freak flag for the weekend like this is for me, then I want to make the most of it. And so having to worry about a budget when I'm there and counting nickels and dimes, that kind of takes away from it. So by all means, bring more than you think you're going to spend. And also have, an open mind as far as the guests that you want to go see, because sometimes, not all the time, but there are, things that come up, production schedules intercede, and suddenly a guest becomes unavailable. If you hang all of your hopes on one guest or two, you might be disappointed. So have some other things in mind. Be sure to take in some of the panels. That's your opportunity to ask some questions that you might not otherwise get to do. See some screenings. Check out those independent, retailers as well, and talk to those independent filmmakers about what they got coming down the pike, because they are excited to talk and share their stuff.
Yeah, I well said. And then what I always like to tell people, and I heard this years ago on a talk station. It was a lady who was a ambassador for Disney World. She was in the marketing department for the Disney parks, and she said, "You can't do it all, and don't waste time worrying about what you're not doing, but focus on enjoying what you're doing." And
Right.
I actually think that's good advice for life, period, but especially at a convention. It is easy to, oh, I've got to get Clive Barker's autograph. Boy, if I don't get Clive Barker's autograph, it's going to be a wasted, weekend. And you may, um, you know, walk by Brad Dourif or miss, hearing Catherine Hicks talk about, um, Seventh Heaven or something. There, you never know what you're going to miss by not being aware of what's happening and listening and just enjoying. Talk to the people in line with you. When you sit down at a bar to have a drink, um, one of my favorite memories of Dragon Con is I was exhausted. I sat down at a bar. I ordered a Diet Coke, and I spent 20 minutes talking to the waitress about Dragon Con and how the city embraces it and how much she enjoys. And, she had a I Love Zombies t-shirt on. And it was truly just a wonderful discussion that if I had not been open to, I wouldn't have had that opportunity. So that's
Yeah.
kind of, and I think your point about money is really good. Um, you know, think a little bit. I already have a spreadsheet about who I want to see. Do I want an autograph? Do I want a selfie? Do I just want to stand in line and meet them? So I'll have the budget, and then I will have some mad money to spend in the dealer's room going, well, how can I not get this, classic Universal replica, um, puzzle together? Or,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. I pick
absolutely.
up stickers. Oh gosh, I pick up stickers and flyers, and I come home and unload my suitcase from all the freebies that I've picked up, and you name it. It's all part of the process. It's all part of the experience, and there's so much there to be seen and done and talked about and shared. It's wonderful.
Good. Well, once again, Texas Frightmare Weekend. It is May 4th, 5th, and 6th in Dallas, Fort Worth. We will be at the Hyatt Regency DFW Airport. There are tickets still available. The website will give you a schedule of events and guests. You can talk about it, sign up for the newsletter, and I, check us out. Todd and I will be there. We're going to figure out an unofficial way to meet. Maybe we'll do a live, a guerrilla episode of the podcast, there in the hallway or something.
That'd be
So,
fun.
yeah, absolutely. Any final thoughts, sir?
No, not really. Other than just I've enjoyed this chat because it's just yet another opportunity for me to just spout off about horror and all the stuff that I love and sharing it with other people. And I really appreciate you doing this podcast because it gets word out there and probably gets some other people amped up for what's to come here in another 6-8 weeks.
Well, thanks. This is a lot of fun. I love this. Um, I love talking about this. My other podcast, I do a Doctor Who podcast and I do my Bruce Springsteen podcast. So this is always kind of fun to put on my convention hat and talk about this kind of what we're doing. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And you were a great guest. I
Oh, well,
love
thank you
that.
very much.
Yeah, I love your stories and what you're doing. Um, Good. If you want to join me and talk about some of your experiences at conventions, you can reach me. I'm on Twitter at Jesse Jackson DFW. Jesse.Jackson2 at Verizon.net. Would appreciate if you go to Tour de Cons on iTunes, rate and review the podcast. Share that with your friends. Um, and I think this is great. I do hope we get to meet each other and share a beverage or two. And we will end with Eddie discovered one of his childhood great truths. Grown-ups are the real monsters, he thought, from Stephen King. Listeners, thank
Definitely.
you. And Todd, thank you. We'll talk to you soon.